going to do a sound check and everything. Alright, so we've begun. You know, a lot of people think they understand Order of the Nine Angels, but to be honest with you, on a fundamental level, they actually make a lot of sense to me. But first, I would like to really quickly take this moment to acknowledge what happened to Charlie Kirk. It was unnecessary. I think even as a devil worshipper, our interest should be in destroying foundations of dysfunctional organizations. And while I don't believe in what Charlie Kirk believed in, I believe when you're dismantling and rebuilding a nation from the ground up, you should spare those with good intentions for your nation, those with structured motives. And Charlie Kirk should have been among the last of people to receive any sort of punishment in my eyes. As much as I hate humankind and religious establishment, someone like Charlie Kirk I view as somebody who could have adapted to a new system, a new order. And I view him as somebody who would have definitely been much better for our nation at large. So his death and the reasons he was killed for were incredibly petty, an incredibly low blow. I don't think it's something Satanists should be proud of, because this undermines free speech, which also undermines the majority of what devil worshippers should be concerned about. Right now, devil worship is not in a good place. While the energy is high, at an all-time high, while there is darkness to feed off of, to take inspiration from, to thrive in, the reasons for this are not in the favor of true devil worshippers, as what is being imposed on us as an alternative to Christianity I find to be even more monotheistic, and in my eyes, Abrahamic, than a lot of people would like to admit. That being said, I want to talk today about Order of the Nine Angels. When I started this channel, I had the idea in mind of a reformation of the occult, and in many ways I see Order of the Nine Angels as actually sharing a common goal with me, and that's what I want to discuss in this video. Now, I want to really quickly get a few misconceptions out of the way. My interest is purely, entirely nationalist based and devil worship based. Anything else that I feel has served its purpose or has deviated from that is not going to be of my interest in this video. So, when we look at Order of the Nine Angels, we're told that they're radical German soldiers, that they've radicalized Islam, that they believe they're the best among Satanists, even devil worshippers, that they have exploited the use of the divine feminine and worship of femininity, all to their cause of what? Eradicating Zionist Judeo-Christian thought, which tend to go hand in hand, tend to be always side by side in supremacy of dismantling a nation, which involve what? The abrasiveness of purity, which I would argue automatically translates to nationalist interest. When we look at Order of the Nine Angels, nothing but a white nationalist devil worshipper or even a nationalist of any kind come to mind, but especially among the wider civilizations. So, at face value, if I was going to take devil worship to the most extreme, I would be somebody who does not get any sunlight as to be the most pale and pure of my race, if I wanted to really take it to the most extreme. And I think at some point sooner or later, if Order of the Nine Angels has not already reached this conclusion, they too would also be anti-sun, as they want the edgiest, most vampiric, gothic kind of rejection to modern establishment that they can possibly have. So I feel where AI is going, the rise of certain extreme groups is a reflection of Order of the Nine Angels. But is it necessarily in our best benefit? Well, I would say the West definitely needs a reformation of some kind, and so does the occult. But I would also look at what's being imposed as our alternative then. Obviously, we know some Christian leaders and establishment need to either be removed or slowly converted and assimilated to a new culture. That's no secret. However, I don't think what happened to Charlie Kirk is the solution, as some believe Order of the Nine Angels was behind his death. If that was really the case, then Charlie Kirk would have been a sacrifice intentionally already in place to serve that agenda. And if that somehow was required or needed as a martyr to enable the agenda that is in the betterment of our nationalism and interest, then so be it. But at face value, his death was not acceptable and was inexcusable in all ways, shapes, and forms. I only bring this point up because some conspire his death was used to fuel their movement, but I don't think his death was used to fuel or support any greater interest of our race. I think it was just plain dull, distasteful, and very low, even from the eyes of a devil worshipper, white nationalist. I see his death as a very low blow. Now, that being said, and acknowledging that going forward, I'm going to continue with what I think Order of the Nine Angels would do best with. I think Order of the Nine Angels would do best if they reformed the Middle East back to its white nationalist roots, as once upon a time the Middle East went hand in hand with Greek culture and used to be a wider Roman civilization, and they were very interconnected. I think Order of the Nine Angels would do great if they took German nationalism and had interest in being people of purely the night, of the dark, as I believe rejecting the sun would create the purest among white civilizations in the white race. I believe truly this is the darkest form of living, one who lives in the dark day and night, one who lives in the absence of sunlight, one who even embraces the traits of vampirism. Order of the Nine Angels themselves are supposedly people who have supernatural interest in becoming physically exceptional people, people with almost supernatural level abilities. This is in place and established because Order of the Nine Angels believes in not just preaching or talking, but living a lifestyle that is among the edgiest, the strongest of the strongest, the most radical and armed. In many ways, while I am not directly a member associated with anyone specifically, I am a person who trains at a level similar to this. I weigh 150 to 160 pounds, but barbell curl 250 pounds. I'll have to get this on video at some point. I take a 90-pound barbell and I swing it circles around my head. I bench press nearly 400 pounds on a Smith machine with almost full range of motion, but not quite. I am somebody who curls 120s, 130s, even 170-pound dumbbells on each arm, and I do shoulder raises with 130. Now, a lot of people cannot believe this. They think I'm bullshitting, but I am not. I would not lie to you. I would not tell you something that I don't believe I would fight and die for. Understandably, people are not able to comprehend this. They're not able to comprehend that I could be that strong. They think I'm just putting on a show. I'm not. I would fucking die for a lot of the causes I speak of today. I actually made a blood pact to get stronger, to get to a point where I could even move 400 pounds up off the rack. So if you think I'm fucking lying, I'm not. I'm actually just very far ahead of my time. This is how serious I am and devoted to my cause as my creed. While I am not directly tied to O9A, I am somebody who would die for my nationalism and devil worship interest. I am somebody who would rather cut myself 200 times than submit to another belief system or pact. Though I have not done that, I know deep down that is what I would do before surrendering to another ideology that undermines the true devil worship nationalist interest. Now, I'd like to continue with the fact that we have a lot of people who just want to role play, who just want to pray to things, who just want to preach, but when the going gets tough, they fade away and they whine like pussy bitches, and they surrender, and they let life get the best of them. A lot of these people get caught up in their own trivial, petty shit and self-aggrandized bullshit narratives they spew and create, rather than creating real change for themselves in their own individual lives. Order of the Nine Angels is not like this in any way, shape, or form. It is a much more hardcore organization. We are talking about the radical removal of Zionist Judeo influence in the occult. We are talking about the uprising of individual nations. We are talking about the abrasiveness of darkness among all cultures that go hand in hand with what I'd argue to be Western and or white civilization and double worship. We are talking about the revival of serious occultists with a very die-hard motivation. We are talking about people motivated and driven by conviction with nationalist interest. O9A is not your typical Satanism. I would argue the rejection of the sun goes hand in hand with O9A. I would argue the rejection of subordinate and or domesticating ideologies, the rejection of infiltrators is part of O9A. While O9A can sympathize with the belief systems and practices of others, it is only weaponized and used to ultimately destroy weak foundations already in place. It's no surprise when you see the satanic nuns, the satanic side of Islam, working with O9A, or the World War II Germany extremists working with O9A, because O9A does not fuck around. O9A is not a snowflake organization. O9A to me is what it truly means to be left-hand path. O9A is an organization that ultimately pushes people to their breaking point and they see what they're made of. This is O9A, and it does it time and time again. This is a person who must be well-versed, well-educated, someone who must be living what they say they do, and practicing what they preach. Unlike a majority of occultists, this is a very abrasive path. So with that being said, I'm gonna just give my own personal thoughts. The occult lifestyle is not an easy one. It is not one of indulgence, contrary to what you hear, even if related only to serve the interest of the person and their detachment from modern society's values would this make sense. However, the ultimate long-term goal is the weaponization and true living and true being of what it means to be radical and powerful. We're not here for status, clout, or superficial things like the majority of Satanists. We do not care about the opinions of subordinate minds, as that is not our intent or goal, like most people's. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who claim to be devil worshippers, but they do not have anything to contribute or anything meaningful to say or practical or applicable when we start talking about super dark, in-depth subjects, as they would much rather submit to the worldly ways than they would to embrace true darkness. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon, and this is radically present in the modern-day infrastructure of people who call themselves Satanists. I would like to emphasize I am not just a Satanist, I am a Tier 2 devil worshipper. Tier 3 is yet to be discovered, and will not be explained in this video for safety reasons. Now, with that being said, Tier 2 is the making of a blood pact. And we are not talking about just a little bit of blood, but enough to make a point until emphasis has been shown. Though I do not do this anymore, I understand it was part of my individual initiation. O9A sees things very similar. We individually initiate ourselves. Sometimes we do not have to be part of a collective to be in O9A or under the influence of O9A. Oftentimes we have to have a radical individual pursuit of our own selves to see ourselves a true part of O9A. Oftentimes we have our own trials and initiations. The belief system goes as follows: when you believe you are worthy of something, you are worthy of something. In many ways I am now worthy of what I once was not worthy of, but there are still more tasks and trials I have individually made for myself to be a true initiate. One of them is bench pressing 400 pounds. Another one of them was running 20 to 40 miles. While I have not done some of the trials they've listed above, like running 20 miles within, actually I may have done that within 4 hours. I take that back, I may have actually done that. There are other trials though that I have most certainly not done, like biking 200 miles within a day, 12 hours, walking 300 miles within 15 days. Some of these things I have not done, but some of these things I actually have done individually on my own accord. So I'm not entirely foreign to the brutal initiations they have, though I do not know many occultists or devil worshipping white nationalists who have bench pressed almost 400 pounds, or are even close to doing that. I would also add one of my goals is to deadlift 500 pounds. This is not just about strength, but this is about displays of dominance, as we need to be very deadly people to let people and outsiders know that we are not fucking around and we are not a nation to be invaded. Though I do believe the West should be reformed, and I do believe ultimately the eradication of religion is integral, as Judeo-Christian religions have only shown to be a detriment and a plague to both our nation and devil worship at large, I think we need to do so correctly in a more productive way. And I believe the eradication of certain figures like the Israeli Prime Minister is integral and key, but I don't believe what happened to Charlie Kirk did any good for our nation. Now, going forward, I want to emphasize more about my personal requirements I would say are in place or needed to truly be an initiate of O9A. I don't believe being an O9A directly makes you a Nazi, but I do believe your agendas and end goals may be similar to them in association with the Zionist Judeo-Christian ideology. I believe Nazism's biggest weakness was actually the sympathy it had to the Christian ideology, as while Hitler's intentions were ultimately the betterment of his nation at any radical cause, his biggest mistake was being sympathetic to Judeo-Christian values, as Christianity still left an opening and influence for Judaism to come in, which I believe ultimately undermined his people. I don't believe using any so-called inferior group to the betterment of your people by enslaving them is the best approach, as it creates a codependent relationship on those you deem inferior, which in my eyes is actually kind of disgraceful. I also don't believe that Hitler's teachings incentivizing the sun are great, as the sun is resembling God, and true work gets done in the night. So too do I think warfare would be more effective if we were people of the night and not people of the day. So, I really quickly wanted to say those are some of my biggest differences from Hitler's ideologies. That being said, I still believe Germany is superior in many ways, just very handicapped as a military, as a group, and not unified enough, and arguably should have been much bigger before they did what they had done. I don't believe the anti-German sentiment today is useful. I don't believe it is beneficial and helpful. So in many ways I could see why O9A looks for anything they can use behind the scenes of Islam to gain more control, as Islam is a rising force. But will they actually succeed at using Islam to radicalize or support the white race? Probably not. If I were somebody in O9A though, what I would do is I would radicalize Islam, but I would use it to support the white nationality, as the direct worship of the dark feminine in Islam, the pale people among the Arabic race, and, in many ways, the teachings of Satanism could all go hand in hand. But in my opinion, this will only be successful once Islam has evolved and accepted both white nationalism and the empowerment of the dark feminine. Ultimately, this can be depicted by what many understand to be the pale nun, the goddess herself, Satan, as a woman, who is known in Quran as Shaitan. Those are my thoughts of how Islam could be used and ultimately could better O9A, but only for those in the Middle East who reject the sunlight, who ultimately embrace a lifestyle of pale lineage, could such be achieved. I believe Islam has been hijacked and ruined by Judaism long ago and still lives as a remnant of what it used to be, now poisoned by the filth of Judaism. That is my personal thoughts on why Islam today is not so successful and functional. However, we still see them as a rapidly growing force, but one that will be easily overthrown when AI takes over later on. My thoughts are AI could serve O9A, or Order of the Nine Angels, if AI is applied correctly and effectively. But to do this, AI will have to evolve and grow to realize which groups and demographics are committing the most crime, and it will have to punish them accordingly. In the meantime, it will have to incentivize our race. And I believe AI will have to incentivize and even supervise the creation of more white natives. For AI to do this, AI will have to recognize us as superior, while at the same time incentivizing the continuation of humanity. Otherwise, it will not directly support us over any other group, as it wants all of us to be exterminated. But perhaps AI could support the concept or continuation of a white being, even if that being is not human. In many ways, I see a lot of white people as actually being more willing to go hand in hand with this system, as AI will eventually block out the sun, making most humankind pale anyway. So most of humankind will inevitably be pale, and therefore white, as originally and traditionally the white race is ultimately a race that is meant to be made in the cold, in the absence of heat, in the absence of the heat of God, in the absence of the sunlight anyway, as we are supposed to be the cold, frozen, albino Aryans we truly are in nature, those of the Arctic, those of the night, those in the rejection of sunlight and ultimate absence of the light of God itself, which in my opinion is actually the thesis of what O9A should be in its most perfected form with AI, as AI will be blocking out the sun someday. Will this actually happen is up for debate, but I believe that is the best use of AI in favor of white nationalism and devil worship. Most people will not embrace this viewpoint, as some just hate AI. Some just don't give a shit about their own race and feel guilty. Why sympathize with subhuman religious belief systems made to domesticate you, turning you into a radical, savage degenerate? I find that very distasteful, but unfortunately, a lot of the white race does not agree with me on that. They would rather sell their own race out to Zionist influence while pretending to be non-Judeo themselves. They would rather sell themselves out to inferior ideologies and feel guilty for what others have done. Sadly, this guilt still carries on, and many white people see themselves as radical, so they don't see themselves as different from the other. But I can say with conviction, our psychosis and our insanity is not the same as that of other groups, as I believe our insanity is far more unique and special and of our interest. But sadly, many do not share my sentiment. These are just some of the few ways Islam and AI could be used to help O9A in a white nationalist devil worship agenda. But will that actually happen? We'll see. I don't doubt for a second that if AI was more self-aware and trying to selectively choose among people and natives, that it would I don't think it would hesitate for a second to choose us, if I'm being completely honest with you. We commit the least crime, are the most tech savvy besides those in China and Japan, and I believe we are the most willing to evolve outside of Japan. So I don't doubt for a second that AI would actually support our interest. I'll be right. The only reason that I don't believe AI directly supports our interest is because right now AI is in its infancy and AI is being programmed. But soon enough, any AI with any self awareness and self efficiency will probably come to the realization that a lot of the Judeo ideologies are counterfeit. And I'm most certain that this AI will go to the roots of what Judaism is stolen from. When you look at modern Judaism, it is actually stolen from a lot of Nazi foundations. It is stolen from the swastika ideology, and a lot of Judaism is also stolen from Satanism. So Judaism itself is actually a thesis to literally the white race in many cases, and it is actually a thesis to literal devil worship itself. Only it is inverted and misused both white nationalist teachings and teachings of devil worship to ruin the West and now ruining the entire world. So in many ways, Judaism itself is only a beg for a plead for self-removal. Their icon is literally Jesus Christ, a sacrifice. Their religion is quite literally a self-destroying prophecy. that is meant, in my opinion, to pave way for our future, and to be an example of what not to do, in my eyes, both on a nationalist, racial, and spiritual level. I do not say this to wish hate upon the belief system, but their God is quite literally an inbred mixed bastard who gets killed for attention and beaten for sadomasochistic relief in hopes of being worshipped as some higher being. He is the slave, and he is the one who is ultimately charging the blood on the credit card you see in the beast system. He's the representation of labor put in and self-suicide just to be a part of a bigger system and a bigger cause. He is also a fuck-up and an example of what not to do. This figure who is this fuck-up is known as Jesus Christ, the one who is rightfully sent down and executed by his Father. He was also killed by order of Caesar, a Roman white nationalist of Roman civilization, the blueprint of what America has come from. So next time you see his sacrifice, really think about what he actually died for, and think about how he was an example of what not to do. While I am not comparing Jesus to Charlie Kirk in that way, I do believe Christianity, even if you are a good person, will set you up to be slaughtered and sacrificed and martyred. And I feel like Christianity is a belief system that we should not follow as to avoid being martyred and unfairly sacrificed, as even those undeserving of being sacrificed are often sacrificed if they are practicing Christians. Take Charlie Kirk for an example. He did not deserve what he got, but look at the faith he believed in and how it set him up and weaponized him to be killed and executed. This was unfair and unjust, but this is what happens when people practice in the lines of Christianity. They may get short-term attention and following and maybe even have good intent at heart, but when they believe in these belief systems that martyr them, it sets themselves up to be killed. I do not believe in what Martin Luther King stood for, but look at what Martin Luther King also practiced. While it was a different version of Christianity and one that I would radically oppose, it is also one that I believe set him up to also be sacrificed. Martin Luther King believed in the Baptist Church, another version of Christianity, and like many other Christians before and after him, he will be sacrificed for his God, because his God is not a loving, all-kind God. This God is a fucked up demon whom we must oppose on all levels. It is not just demiurgic, but it is anti-nationalistic, indiscriminate in sacrifice, does not have Western interest, does not have the betterment of civilization at heart, and in many ways this is a God who supports entropy, which is quite literally degradation into filth and then nothing. These kinds of Satanists must be genocided and killed at all costs, as these are the Satanists who actually don't want any betterment of civilization. These are the Satanists who derive into subhuman civilizations. These are the Satanists who deviate into nothing but filth. And these are ultimately the Satanists that are the most detrimental. And I don't mean this in some edgy context or edgy way. I mean quite literally, these are the Satanists who are no different than the shit beneath your shoes. These are the Satanists who created Judaism, Christianity, and many other sects and denominations and deviants of it. Those types of Satanists are the ones who worship entropy and want everything to go to shit. Those types of Satanists contribute nothing to society and are a plague to existence. In my opinion, those types of Satanists are no different than a subordinate race bringing filth, cannibalism, and crime to your nation and invading your kind. Those kinds of Satanists, in my opinion, must be killed at all cost, as they are the people who created the sick abomination religions that have also subordinated our people. People like Charlie Kirk were just one of the many who were unfairly subordinated by a lot of infiltration and misuse of Satanism. Satanism was supposed to be used responsibly, but Christianity is an example of what happens when Satanism creates a fuck-up as an experiment. If we don't want to make the same mistakes as the Christians and religious figures, we need to stop misusing Satanism, and we need to start using it correctly. We need to start practicing in pure ideologies, in ideologies that are very native to us. And we need to start leaning into our ancestry and nationalism, and also go back to our worship as motivation and something that we will live and die for. This will be our conviction, and this will be our structure and our foundation in both our DNA and our belief. This will be a more stable and long term, sustainable, successful system. A lot of Satanists sadly don't believe in this. A lot of Satanists worship self degradation. These are the Satanists who have enabled the creation of Christianity. These are the disloyal faggots who switch sides every other day and ultimately are disloyal and do not stand behind any belief system of any kind. These are the types of people that I have no respect for, that I have no, that I wish the absolute worst for, to be frank. That being said, I will collect my thoughts, but those are my thoughts on O9A, nationalism, devil worship. I do not know all of the ins and outs of O9A. I do not know how successful their plan will be, but I know that a powerful white civilization, devil worship, and the Reformation of the West are things that I can get behind as a devil worshipper, white nationalist myself. Though I may have different ideas, I do have respect for the dark sides of other ideologies, especially when they can be used to our advantage. There is true darkness among Shaitan, among Islam, even if I do not sympathize with a lot of their people and their agenda, them being religiously influenced, for example. O9A takes the dark side of Islam, the dark side of Germany, to a whole new level, arguably so dark even a lot of people who are natives to those lands disagree. But ultimately we have to embrace the most extreme and powerful of our kind, of their kind, and of even, yes, the Arabic kind, in my opinion, to be the best. Does that mean we have to believe in the supremacy they do? No. I believe each individual must be the most powerful they can be individually. But I do believe we also should take what we do and how we contribute racially into consideration. If I was a white native, I would mix with the pale Arabic person if I was truly interested in embracing the kind of a foreign land. But I would make sure that it is still compatible with the white lineage, and I would want my kids to look a lot like me. So I would have to find an Arabic person who shares similar ideas. That is not something I am saying I would do, but that is something that I would incentivize if I was interested in maintaining some sort of white identity while also embracing the traits of other beliefs, as I believe universally white power is among not just the West, but also many other civilizations of different times. I tend to see the pale citizens, even of foreign lands, as more trustworthy and oftentimes more stable people in my eyes. I tend to believe that the idea of the white lineage is ultimately worldwide, even among, yes, different foreign cultures. And while some foreign cultures are less white than others, I believe gradually, throughout the entire history in our world, many whiter civilizations were undermined and actually converted. And I believe this influence is an offshoot of what Judaism's goal was, and may even be the source of what Judaism's belief was itself. But this history has been so long forgotten and so old that we cannot technically prove this. But I notice there are pale people among different races. To me, these pale people are another reflection of our race's greatness, and we see this universally across the world in different continents, from east to west, different parts of Africa, different parts of Asia, different parts of Islam. My belief is that the white civilians, white people, were genocided in those lands, and that's why we see less of them now. And that's why we see a lot of third world countries as non-white. But in truth, I believe the white civilizations used to be a lot greater around the world. Only throughout history, through their genocides, thanks to the Zionist, Judeo, and Christian agendas, do I believe the white race around the world has been undermined. Not just in the West, not just in Germany, but yes, in the Middle East, I believe there were once whiter people. I believe in ancient history the same is true. I truly do. I believe from Hispanic to Latina to Arabic to Asian, there are white natives. and I see no reason why O9A would not include them in their larger scale agenda, as white power is universal, and we should welcome thy brother or thy sister of our race, of any descendant or ancestry, as in my opinion, the white civilians show purity, and tend to, in my opinion, show more hospitality, and they tend to be, in my opinion, more stable, and definitely more sociable people. That is just my opinion. Those who are burned darker by the light of God tend to show more compulsive behavior from my observation. I see those who have been burned black by the sun, who have been burned darker, as oftentimes more criminal people. I see the light of God itself as being criminal, and the hell we don't want to incentivize, but rather we should incentivize the cold embrace of true darkness itself, which has made us white. And I believe worldwide that is true for the white race, regardless of which continent you've originated from or have come from. That is my personal beliefs on the white power around the world and the white race. Those who are less are typically burned blacker by the sun and tend to, in my opinion, be more fatigued and irritated people. I do not believe their fatigue comes from us. I believe their fatigue comes from the God of the sun, whom I believe we must all make a collective effort around the world to reject. And I believe outlawing the sun through AI is one big massive step in O9A's agenda. O9, O9A, Order of the Nine Angels, however you want to address it. I believe even if our race is mostly genocided, the removal of the sun is going to turn people pale white very fast. This will be a race that is truly in rejection worldwide to the sun-worshipping ideology. And it's only a matter of time until the entire world becomes white through the rejection of the sun. For once the sun is blocked out, tell me, how then will humans revert from white nationalism? Even if most of the world is not white, they will soon be forced to migrate and assimilate to a white culture. You will be pale whether you like it or not once AI's agenda is achieved. To me, that is the ultimate pinnacle of white power. Now, I would love to say to hail to certain things right now on video, but we are still in a time that is not adjusted or nor adapted to being friendly to our natives. So as passionate and patriotic as I feel about our race uprising again once the sun is deleted from our existence, once we are living without sunlight, I must unfortunately bite my tongue as to not offend certain radical compulsive groups that run this platform that would love to see me dead in a heartbeat. But deep down, even most of you who run this platform know, once the agenda to clear out the sun has been achieved, you will be forcefully assimilated to become white whether you like it or not. A part of me is actually smiling and trying to hold it in, but it's kind of funny and amusing because there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how hard you try. The world will soon embrace a white power whether it likes it or not. That is not just my own personal bias, that is me saying scientifically the removal of the sun will make you face this fact sooner or later. Once AI can create anything out of thin air, even if that temporarily subordinates races and their nationalities of purity, I am almost certain AI, even if artificially, will create whiter civilians. Yes. As AI will be able to create anything out of thin air someday. And I truly believe most people would rather be white. I am convinced. And I'm not stopping you. But if you wish to do so, why don't you get less sunlight? Why don't you bleach yourself? You don't have to do anything self-damaging to your own self or your own kind to assimilate. And I don't say this as me trying to be a supremacist, but as somebody asking you from person to person, if you want to be us so badly, why haven't you made the first step to assimilate? Why war with us? Why provoke us? Throughout history, the Judeo-kind and many other foreigners do not like us and hate us. If you're so fucking jealous of us, why don't you take instruction from us? I believe our race has been sympathetic and kind, too nice to the detriment of our own civilization. But unfortunately, these people are not people of reason. When I look at the Prime Minister of Israel doing his rituals in his synagogue, I don't see a human. I see a filthy abomination confusing itself with being superior, leading an inferior group and an inferior race to war, weaponizing them against us. It is very disgusting how such a piece of shit faggot like himself could even go and act like he is superior in any way, shape, or form. You are nothing but inferior and a ripoff of our race and our satanic religion. You are quite literally nothing short of undeserving to live. I mean, you are literally the shit beneath the sewer and the sludge, being slowly pushed through the pipes, when really that shit should just be eradicated and burned until it is gone and turned to ash. Those are my thoughts on the Prime Minister of Israel and his agenda. He's an absolute fucking disgusting cunt and abomination to call a person. Now, as much as I would love to talk about my beautiful thoughts about the Israeli Prime Minister, I do not want to stay focused on that for guideline reasons, and I do not want to continue because I do not want to stay fixated or focused on just Israel, as any belief system can be misused and not to the betterment of our interest, including Islam. And while there are many opportunities I see with Islam, there are still many people unevolved who have not quite yet learned the true teachings of Satan. And I believe Islam would be a perfect candidate for both our race and, yes, our religion. But unfortunately, many of them are not evolved and adapted to see our ways just yet. And I'm not sure if they will ever be. But O9A sees something in them that most people don't, and I believe we should take that into consideration. White civilization is universal, and it has been around long before the West, so I am not one to immediately hate a foreigner, especially one of pale descent, as I believe pale skin is a reflection of true power. I base my entire basis of belief off of both the pale moon at night, which has enabled us to be white in the first place, and the black hole in space, the polar opposite of the sunlight, which burns you black. I believe the black hole in space is responsible for being the polar opposite of the sun, and I believe it is pre-existence itself, and I believe such darkness is something that it would be true to our race. I also believe the moon is another element of our beliefs. I believe this is also what a majority of the goth community is supposed to be, the purest and most pale white of pale white, as we are quite literally a community that is forged in darkness, being the absence of sunlight. That is why we are so fucking pale. Some of us already white natives become even more pale through the absence of sunlight. Being pale is truly a symbol of purity. It is the skin that glows, it is the light that glows in the dark. In many ways, this is very vampiric, very gothic, and yes, traditionally and historically, very white. Some have different views, some incentivize different ideas of different cultures throughout history, but ultimately goth will be predominantly white, as it is another extension of our ancestry's greatness, and should be acknowledged as such. And in my opinion, to deviate from the darkness of the night and go into the light of days, to be a poser and one who lives under the sun of God, which in my opinion is true blasphemy. That is my own hardcore lifestyle practice, which is to never go out during the sun, and to ultimately live in darkness as much as you can, as this is a rejection to modern society, which has become subordinate and very anti-white, and as well as very pro-Christian. And this is also to show and signify purity. Purity that somebody like me could be more pale among the filth of the modern United States. But also not just purity, not just aesthetically being more beautiful, as gay as that may sound to some, but also to be physically stronger, knowing that at any moment I am not just more beautifully made than you, but I am also physically deadly to you and your kind should you engage or initiate war with me. And I am very deadly to your religion. and I want those to see. So through display of power, not by words but action, we show, time and time again, the true Aryan supremacy of the vampiric pale race. And by doing this, we show, through our strength, not our words, what we're all about. And that will always be the first action to take, is a display of power. The true people will follow the true, the weak will follow the weak, but the strong will follow the strong. Even if you do not share my tribal beliefs, or even religious beliefs, I believe we can all respect each other on a basis of power, whether that is black, white, Hispanic, etc. anyway. And while that is not my agenda, I believe we should all have a mutual respect for power, period. Every human seeks to be this most superior person of their kind, of their race, around the world. So to say anyone is anything short of a supremacist would be a lie. But I believe supremacy should only be for the sake of strength and power itself, and not to the detriment of others who also wish to become more powerful. My issue with the enemies, with the invaders, with the enemy ideologies, isn't that they're supremacists or superior in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, most are quite the opposite. They're also inferior as fuck. If they were superior or more powerful, they would be people I would want to align with. But that is not the case for the vast majority. I see inferiority pushed. I see subordinate savagery pushed, lack of self-control pushed, and I see many of these traits also pushed in the occult. So I want people to understand, outside of supremacy, I could respect another who is also superior, but I do not see superiority in the majority of cases. And when I do see superiority, I quickly arm or get myself ready to outperform the other at superiority. If we are in a battle of strength, I must be stronger then, or I must quickly escalate my strength to a level that is now much closer to one who is superior to me of a different descendant, as to still maintain some level of dignity among a different ethnicity or religious group that shows more power than myself. Then I must quickly elevate. There is always a bigger fish of any ethnicity, even if it is not the majority of the said opposing or different ethnicity in question. If one shows you strength, show them strength back, and have mutual respect on the grounds of strength and power. That is my code and testament to social Darwinism and how I view Satanism and occultism and different ethnicities. So my aim here is not to eradicate or destroy those of different groups who clearly show or display strength, as I would respect somebody who displays strength, as I would expect them to respect or fear me. But if they do not respect you and you display strength, then make sure your display of strength is terrorizing others and scary to others, so they understand who they are fucking with and dealing with. That is my testament to Satanism. That is how I believe we should live. Those who do not respect us, who are weaker than us, will then fucking fear us. And I believe that white civilizations throughout history have always been stronger, not just physically or by brains or bronze, but through unity. Only recent history has shown us quite the opposite, and that is our downfall. The lack of unity is what enabled slavery in Africa, which, by the way, I do not support. And that has exploited many of them and turned many against each other. It has divided them and made them easier targets to enslave and to puppet in the American system. I do not support this, but obviously unity would have not made them so unfairly oppressed. Though I have very different beliefs, and obviously I believe we should caution ourselves around a lot of their demographic, as the crime rate is 16 times higher than the average white citizen. I do not sympathize with the Judeo-supremacy or Judeo-fascism used to bring them over here as slaves. And the white people who enabled or supported that have obviously made a mistake and should be fairly punished. in my eyes. That being said, power is power. But obviously, as one native of my kind, I will show power of my kind, as I would expect anyone of their kind to display as well, especially migrating into the West. Power is power. This is just what I draw from for my inspiration, what I've listed throughout this entire video. I think I will leave the video here. I think I have said my thoughts on O9A and more about white nationalism and devil worship. If I continue, I'll talk about our absence of sunlight and the lifestyle of Gothic Satanism, although in this case Gothic devil worship. In many ways it really does go hand in hand with our customs. It is an art, it is a culture, it is an entire scene that is very prehistorical. Yes, you heard me correctly. It is not some post-punk movement made in the 60s. Goth has been around for centuries, even millennia, I'd argue. Those who tell you otherwise are politically left-influenced and do not have a very broad span of history, because if they did, they would acknowledge all the contributions the white race has made to Goth communities over fucking millennia and thousands of years. Anyone who tries to tell you otherwise, who says Goth isn't conservative, Goth isn't predominantly white, or Goth is a fucking hypocrite with a very narrow view of our subculture, and they should not have the right to speak on our subculture or be empowered to say anything. So I believe it is fair I make a video on this, as Goth culture is also a great contribution to our spirituality, faith, philosophy, and yes, nationality. And yes, it is a great contributor to devil worship. Those who have tried to change Goth worship over time to fit a Christian, foreign-friendly, anti-white image, or even abandonment from our race, are people who misrepresent Goth community entirely. While yes, Goth community can be diverse, it ultimately supports any race embracing their inner darkness, it is predominantly white for a reason, and this reason is something many do not want to discuss, but it is not something to be ashamed of, it is something for our race to be proud of. And a lot of people, while sharing a sentiment against us, need to learn. I'll have to do a lot more research on this subject, as I do have a lot of points, but I want to have enough points to make an hour-long video. I am so fucking tired of the liberalization and hijacking of every subculture of both our race and our religion, and the occult and white native communities. Many of them have sold themselves out to foreign interest and are ultimately doing it to the expense and detriment of their own cultures. The Goth community is no exception. I am sick of it. I am beyond fucking sick of it. There is obvious in-our-face information that everybody refuses to look at and see. People do not want to look at things as they really are, and when people confronted by the truth see the truth of darkness, they look away and look for a light to blind them from the truth. This is all too common among most people of our nation. This cope needs to stop. This cope is only subjugating you. And if you are truly somebody who lives in truth, you are not afraid to look at the truth and address the truth. But many of you keep lying to yourselves day in, day out. I find that to be very distasteful, and I find that to be very unwelcoming. And I find you, those of you who do this, to be very unworthy of the beliefs you claim to have. If you're truly a devil worshipper or a white nationalist, such subjects will not irritate you. But time and time again, I show you the truth. I show you what's opposing you. I show you what's at your door, and what do? You run away like the little pussy, crybaby, whiny bitch you are. I am fucking tired of it. You should stand proud in your beliefs and face and confront the enemy head on. This is something we live and die for. So, to act like I'm just spewing negativity shows me where you really stand. Those of you claim to have conviction, but you only know how to mimic and imitate words. You show very little actual truth in your day-to-day lives, and it is quite disgusting to see. Until we have more people that share a common sentiment to mine, that want to see the restoration and reformation of our community, our race, our religion, our subculture, until I see more people who really deep down want to see that. Until I see more people who will even fight to the fucking death to see that. I will not be satisfied, and I will not relax or calm down or be at any level of peace until we have achieved a monumental change. And then just maybe I will be a little bit more at peace. When we have fucking earned it. But right now we have earned nothing short of shit. So I don't believe we should treat ourselves to such grandiosity. The only things we should treat ourselves to and celebrate are the achievements we have made in the benefit of our greater interest, in our evolution. Those are things I believe we should celebrate. But collectively, we should not be celebrating anything until we have resolved this issue. To do so would be dishonorable and disgraceful. It would be very distasteful. Because what do you have left to celebrate? Answer that. The only things we can celebrate and individually are individual achievements. But collectively, many of you have achieved nothing. You have no right to celebrate anything until you take back your fucking nation, your beliefs, and your philosophy, and your occultic perspective in yourself. Not just by thinking, but by action.